Wakey, wakey, the Kellogg's football camps are here, all over the country. It's game on. Learn new skills, make new friends, and have loads of fun at your local clubs. Grab your boots for a summer of football at the Kellogg's football camps. Parents, buy a promotional pack of Cocoa Pops, Rice Krispies and cornflakes before the end of June to claim a free day. To the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees. It's time for part 2 on one of the greatest footballers there's ever been. And without doubt, the greatest footballer Northern Ireland has ever seen. Of course, it's time for part 2 on the great Georgie Best. So, it was the 1966 quarter-finals and Manchester United were playing Benfica, who, I've got to tell you, at that time were one of the most formidable and dangerous sides in European football. They were like the Real Madrid of today. They had all the top players and were winning all the time. United were absolutely desperate to win their first ever European Cup. And they had a secret weapon. His name was George Best. Benfica had barely lost a match at home in years, and they were on fire. But Best skinned players left, right and centre and scored 2 cracking goals in the space of 13 minutes. He then assisted and created opportunities, massively contributing to United winning the game 5-1. Unfortunately, United were knocked out in the semi-finals, but this just made them hungrier. And a couple of years later, in the 1968 European Cup, they made it all the way to the final. And this is very much thanks to some of the great goals, skills and goal-scoring opportunities created by George Best. The final of the European Cup was to be held at Wembley Stadium in London. Sir Matt Busby was the manager, and he had amazing players in the team, like Bobby Charlton and George Best. The game was neck and neck, and after 90 minutes it was 1-1, heading into extra time. George Best, in extra time, got the ball, slid past the defender, sent the keeper the wrong way with a feint, and then slotted it into the back of the net. After this, the goals didn't stop coming, and it ended up finishing 4-1 to United. They were the European champions for the first time, and it was an incredible moment. There are some amazing pictures of Sir Matt Busby, the United manager, in this. There's also some amazing pictures of many of the players, and of course, George himself. One of the reasons the pictures are so good from this game, and many of the other games around this era, is because when the game stopped, photographers were allowed on the pitch. They would run onto the pitch, celebrating in the corner with the players, taking their pictures up close. They were properly involved in the action. And that's why when you see some of the pictures from this time around the 50s and 60s and so on, they are so close and they are so in the middle of it all. George was already a proper superstar and was one of the most well-known figures in football. But after this performance in the European tournament and winning the cup final with United, he became one of the most regular faces on television. He was on TV adverts, he was on chat shows, he was on radio shows, he was in newspapers. You name it, George Best was on it. Back in those days, footballers being on the TV doing adverts for things like hairspray or products like that really wasn't a thing. George was the first fashion icon from football and was really the man who started it all. So when you see footballers on the television promoting a product, just remember, George Best was the man who started it. In 1969, the then manager Matt Busby, who had been through an unbelievable amount with the club and done so much with the club, decided it was time for him to call it a day. he was going to become a manager upstairs rather than a manager in the dugout. And after this, United went through an extremely difficult period. It's a bit like it has been over the recent years. Sir Alex Ferguson left and Manchester United haven't been the same since. George was still scoring lots of goals, but it wasn't enough for United to be winning the league or any major competitions. It seemed that George was becoming frustrated with all of his stuff, and he started acting out of character, making clumsy challenges and doing silly things like throwing mud at the referee and getting himself carded and sent off. It wasn't just his actions on the pitch which were getting him into trouble. George was making the wrong decisions outside of the pitch and outside of football. He wasn't turning up to training, he wasn't turning up to games, and at one point he even got himself suspended. In the end, it couldn't go any further, and George quit playing for Manchester United and quit playing football overall. George told the media that he wasn't physically or mentally fit to play football anymore, and there was other stuff which was stopping him from being a professional player and playing at his best. George eventually did return to play for United after lots of people trying to get him out of retirement and get him on the right track again. George eventually did return to play for United. But because he hadn't been drinking the right things or eating the right things or living the right life, he was no way near as good as he once was. And in 1974, he really did leave Manchester United forever. It was a sad day for George, Sir Matt Busby, his teammates, his friends, his family, and of course, fans who had been there through the wonder years. George had been with the club since he was 15 years old. He'd won the league, the European Cup, and so much more. This really was a sad day. George sporadically played the odd game for a couple of other clubs after this. But when the big soccer boom happened in the USA, the great Pelé hadn't long been at the New York Cosmos, and soccer was becoming one of the fastest growing sports in the country's history. George Best was signed up to play for a team in Los Angeles called the Los Angeles Aztecs. It's reported that the globally recognised singer-songwriter Elton John was involved in the Aztecs, and he was a big part of getting George to come and play for the club. George attracted tens of thousands of people when he was playing at the club, just like Pelé did when he was playing at the New York Cosmos. And because of the level of football being played didn't match Manchester United or any of the other big teams that George was playing in, he was standing out as a very, very good player. Towards the end of George's playing career, he jumped from club to club. He went from Fulham and then back to the Aztecs, and then he went to clubs in Miami, Hong Kong, Australia, and the list goes on and on and on. But the same problem just kept coming up. He wasn't living his life right outside of the football ground. And because of that, he couldn't continue to be the player that he could have. Although it was a sad ending to George's career, when he was in his prime, he was truly sensational. The crowd had never seen anybody like him. He won some of the biggest competitions in the world. He was constantly voted as the Footballer of the Year in a series of different countries. He represented his country of Northern Ireland, and overall, he was a proper sporting icon. Georgie Best will go down as one of the greatest players to have ever done it. He's up there with Johan Cruyff, Pelé, Maradona, and the rest of them. And he's a player who will be spoken about for a very, very long time. I hope that you've enjoyed listening and learning about the journey of George Best over these 2 episodes. And remember, if you know someone who loves football just as much as you do, then please tell them about Football for Kids. And whether you're playing football soon, watching it on the telly, or pitch side, I hope that you enjoy the game. See you next time. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. And remember that Kellogg's have amazing football camps taking place throughout the school summer holidays all across the country. In fact, they're in 73 different locations across the UK. The camps are for 5 to 15-year-olds and are in partnership with the EFL, Manchester City, Celtic and Rangers with FA approved coaches. To sign up today, grab a promotional pack of Kellogg's cereal, find the camp code and redeem a free place at www.kellogg'sfc.com. Terms and conditions apply.